Okay, so let's finish off our study in Genesis. We're in Genesis 49 and 50. This is the last two chapters. We're going to kind of do a wrap up. I don't think we're going to do much of a recap. You'll have to go back to this beginning and start over at creation story. And it's just too large of a story to recap everything. Right now, we're in the midst of Jacob kind of giving his dying blessing. And again, this next section is a little bit more of a controversy of what's going on. Are these prophecies? Are these blessings? Are these like the thoughts of God? Are they going to actually have to happen, or God isn't saying what he wants to say? These are blessings of Jacob. Some of this is Jacob's viewpoint of his sons, but a lot of this is going to track really closely to the way God sees them. It's going to kind of give us some understanding of where the sons are standing, a little bit of a report card on their lives at this point. And so again, sometimes we get this sense, like with Jacob and Esau, God chooses Jacob the younger, even from before they're born. But we really see Esau lives into that. He doesn't really want his birthright. He despises it. He doesn't really take the covenant family line thing seriously. Jacob does, and he values it. And so we actually see a lot of the times both the human will and who God pronounces as the chosen one end up being the same thing. Their hearts are inclined, and you just get this idea. It's hard from our side of eternity to understand how God's choosing people. But it seems like they're chosen, and because they're chosen, they're inclined to want to be chosen. And the ones that aren't chosen seem like they don't necessarily want to be. And I'm not saying Ishmael or Esau or Ham weren't blessed. They were, but they weren't going to be the promised line. And now we're seeing again this change, where the promised line's not going to be one son. Jacob doesn't have to pick one son. He might be thinking that. He kind of singles Joseph out for that. And he singles the youngest of Joseph's line out to carry that. But again, that's not really what's going to happen. And all 12 of them are going to carry on the line and be important. We're going to really see the tribe of Judah leading from here on out as the kingly line. Actually, there'll be a short stint where the line of Benjamin will be the king, right, with Saul, and then it'll become the line of Judah. And we've seen that this kingly line has been promised to several of the patriarchs, particularly Abraham and Sarah already. And so we're just kind of following that thread as we see that come up here. But I want to talk about exactly what these 12 blessings are, one by one, and then their fulfillment. Because I think a lot of times we sometimes hear prophecies and then we don't see how they're carried out. There's instructions sometimes given, and we don't realize. I think Elijah is one of those examples. He's told to do a few things and anoint a few people, and we don't actually find out that he doesn't necessarily do them. Like we sometimes assume he did, but he doesn't always. And so again, let's just be clear here. Sometimes it is difficult to figure out exactly where the prophecies or these blessings are fulfilled. So let's just talk through them as we go. I want to spend some decent time on this. That's why I set it aside as its own last lesson. So then Jacob summoned his sons and said, "Assemble yourselves so that I may tell you what will happen to you in the days to come. Gather together and listen, sons of Jacob. Yes, listen to Israel, your father." And so again, in the days to come, it's setting this up as a predictive prophecy. So he's kind of setting him up as a family prophet. Jacob is about to die, and he's like, this is what's going to happen, and these are what the blessings are. So there is a bit of a mix here. Jacob is kind of saying, I have an ability to give prophetic direction of what God's going to do in your lives. And so again, he's not putting himself in the place of God or anything like that. He's just saying, I really feel like I have a sense for what's coming, and I'm going to bless you accordingly. So again, remember Leah's sons, they're going to be the oldest six. They're going to be blessed first here, or at least a set of them. Then we'll get into the concubine sons and then into Rachel's sons. And so again, these oldest six sons have caused a lot of problems, right? They're the ones that sold Joseph into slavery. So again, not very favored. They weren't favored anyway. And so here we see the first one, Reuben. And we know Reuben is disqualified, right? So as the favored son because of some of his antics and sin. And so, Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength, preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power. Okay, that sounds pretty impressive, right? All I hope for: might, strength, dignity, power, uncontrollable as water. You shall not have preeminence because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. So he's basically calling Reuben out and saying, you were on the right, you had all the right things. You had strength, you had dignity, power, might, all these amazingly masculine, head of the family, household traits, but you're uncontrollable as water. And if you've ever tried to control water, you can kind of set its course, but it leaks through everything. It goes where it wants to. And so again, Jacob basically calls him out and says, you're not going to have preeminence. You should have, and you started out that way, but you're not, because you went up to your father's bed. So this had happened decades earlier. So Jacob has been holding this. And again, it's written in the Bible. Everybody's stuff is usually pretty much out in the open, what they did, the sins they committed, and what they done. And again, he said, and this was a usurping thing. He was going to his father's wife. And again, that would have tried to make himself the head of the household before it was his time. And because of this, he lost everything he had. This is a great sin. And we see that in Genesis 35:22. So this is backwards looking. Basically, Jacob's just recounting why Reuben doesn't get to be the head of the household. He had ungoverned impulses. He couldn't be trusted. Jacob openly just confronts this sin in front of all the brothers and recounts it. So there's no secrets in this family, right? So this is kind of backwards looking at Dan. We see that he goes from having preeminence to no preeminence in what he tried to do by usurping his father's position too soon. And so then what happens, so this is looking backwards, but then what happens looking forward? We see Reuben has failed in the time of Deborah to step up and come as part of the tribes to the battle. He's overshadowed by Gad. He's overrun by Moab. He took partial initiatives in the rebellion of Dathan and Abiram in Numbers 16:1. So not a real great, strong future either for the tribe of Dan. He's called out on several different occasions in the future of the tribe because of issues. And so again, we just see that's kind of the way it is. Part of that northern tribes that get carried off into exile. The northern tribes were known for their idolatry from the beginning. They really didn't have a lot of revival or anything like we'd see in the southern tribes. And so again, they're really marked not by doing what God wanted, but being part of that rebellious set of 10 tribes. And so again, we're going to go into the next two sons. So the Reuben's the first one. He's disqualified from the preeminent blessing, right? And then we move into, because the next two, which are Simeon and Levi. And it says Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are implements of violence. Okay, so this is recounting, right? This is historical. They are the ones that slaughtered that town or village. Jacob was so scared after that the people were going to come after him and the family, and there wasn't going to be safety anymore. And so again, it says, may my soul not enter into their counsel. May my glory not be united with their assembly. For in their anger they killed men, and in their self-will they lamed oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it's fierce, and their wrath, for it's cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them among Israel. So he basically has nothing good here to say about Simeon and Levi. He is still, decades later, really angry at them. They had gone in and they'd killed an entire city without him knowing it. They had lamed a bunch of the animals. I mean, he just calls them angry, fierce, wrath, cruel, right? Like these are pretty heavy descriptors. And that you can read in Genesis 34. So backwards looking, not great. And he says, I will not enter in the council, and may my glory not be united with their assembly. So he's basically just saying, they're no good to talk to about anything. They're the ones probably that wanted to kill Joseph, right? They would have been the oldest two other than Reuben. We know Reuben didn't and Judah didn't. So it probably was the two of them instigating that. So there's been huge amounts of family problems with these two. The lack of moral commentary, right, is here. We just get their violent, not just. Again, some people see what they did as just. Other people see it through Jacob's lens that this was violent. They killed in anger and wrath. It was spite, not justice, that drove them, is basically what Jacob is implying here, and that they were unwise. Again, so this is why Reuben has already been disqualified, and now Simeon and Levi are being disqualified. And he's saying you're going to be dispersed among Israel. Basically, you might not get the land in the same way as everybody else. And so in the future, we see that they are not going to be granted their own land in the promised land, neither Simeon nor Levi. And so what Jacob is saying here actually does come to pass. They're going to be dispersed. The tribe of Simeon disintegrates, and we're somewhat absorbed into Judah at some point. We see this in Joshua 19:9, Joshua 2:15, and then again in Nehemiah and 2 Chronicles 34. The tribe of Simeon is barely mentioned at the time of the conquest of Joshua and re-entering the land. So even by the time of Joshua, Simeon is barely even mentioned among the tribes. Levi had an honorable disbursement, however. So Simeon basically is not very honorably dispersed among the tribes. It's kind of just absorbed into some of the other tribes. Levi has an honorable disbursement among the tribes because they're the priestly line. But again, what Jacob's saying here does come to happen. Levi does not get its own particular share of land. It gets set up. And that both tribes were also thoroughly scattered during the exile. So we see that happening as well. So again, some of what Jacob is saying has already happened, and some of it's going to happen in the future, right? They are dispersed among Israel. And so this is kind of, it sounds like almost a punishment for them being this way. And Jacob's blessing, or in this case, more of a curse, all right? He said, cursed be their anger, for it's fierce. And so again, the consequence of that is a scattering of them. So again, that's why I wanted to take a little bit of time, because sometimes we read these really quickly and we just go, okay, I have no idea. He's just saying stuff over his sons. Sounds good and bad. Again, but if you really take time to look at it, these are fulfillments of what's been going on in this family for a while. And so it's kind of setting up for, if you're looking at this, son 1, nope, you caused me trouble. Sons 2 and 3 are murderous. And then now we're going on to son 4, which is Judah. And this is the one that's going to stand out, right? Because Judah, although he's had some issues with Tamar and things, that really didn't bother Jacob. That isn't a huge thing at this point. He did, in a certain sense, when Tamar got married into the family, he did promise her a child, those kinds of things. And so he does recognize that what she did was, in some senses, right in getting the child from him. As for you, Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's son shall bow down to you. Okay, this is a huge blessing. He hasn't blessed the first 3 sons in this way. He's saying, Judah, you haven't disqualified. You haven't been disqualified from this blessing. Your brothers are going to praise you, and your father's sons shall bow down to you. So basically, he's kind of putting him in charge. And this isn't something we necessarily would have seen coming, right? Judah is a lion's cub from the prey. My son, you have gone up. He crouches, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion who dares to stir him up, right? And that's why we refer to Jesus as the Lion of Judah. It's one of the reasons, is because Judah's whole tribe was considered like a lion who dares to stir him up. He's kind of saying there's still some fierceness about Judah. Don't rile him up. He crouches, he lies down, right? The scepters will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet until Shiloh comes. Okay, that's going to be a lot to unpack there. The scepter being like a ruler's scepter and the ruler's staff from between his feet. So he's really saying, Judah, you're going to rule. Now, we know Joseph had the dream that his brothers would bow down to him. That's already happened. And so Joseph's not going to get that again. Actually, this is all coming on Judah now, that he's going to kind of be the one that's going to have the scepter and the staff. And he says, until Shiloh comes. And Shiloh's capitalized in most of your Bibles. It means the man of peace, which we all know is going to be from the line of Judah, which is Jesus. Until he comes. And to him shall be the obedience of the people. And so, again, this is prophesying about Jesus. This is probably the very first ones. Now, did Jacob know that's what was happening? Maybe, maybe not. But he had some hope that this person, Shiloh, was going to come. Did he know it was the same as the angel of the Lord, or how this was going to work? I mean, the incarnation and pre-incarnate, interactions with God are a little different. But at the same time, did he know this was going to be God? He ties his foal to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washes his garments in wine and his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are dull from wine and his teeth white from milk. So what does this mean? What does it mean that he has a donkey's colt, choice vines, wine? He washes his clothes in wine even. His teeth are white from milk. Like, this is all talking about abundance, like kingly abundance. So remember, Judah was problematic. And so all of this kind of comes out of nowhere. So let's just walk this through. He was the one that sold Joseph into slavery. He's the one that kind of helped lie to his father all those years. He's the one, but he was the one that also helped get the relationship with Joseph back. He was the one that took Benjamin. He's the one that instigated that. He's the one that starts leading at that point, right? Joseph had received the firstborn blessing of double inheritance, but Judah would be the royal line. We see that this is being very specifically spoken of here. Judah will be the kingly line, a leader among the tribes. We see this happen in 1 Chronicles 5:2, in Psalm 78, His tribe will be a warrior king. He's being described as a warrior, a lion, one who crouches, right? He's ready to pounce, all these things. He's a lion-like tribe. He has a scepter and a ruler until Shiloh comes. A right king would be coming from his line. We see this idea being reiterated in Ezekiel 21:26. He blessed with success over his enemies. He was going to be blessed with having his brothers bow down to him. And again, he will have plenty of wine and milk, strength and power. The idea of wine and milk being strength and power. The vines will be so common, right? It says that you're going to tie your donkeys to them. And wine is going to be so plentiful they can even wash their clothes in it. So he's really saying you're going to have great abundance, great success over your enemies. Everything you do is going to prosper. The people are the nations, and Jesus is ultimately going to come and have universal reign over more than just the one nation, but all the peoples. And we see this also said again in Daniel 7:13 and 14. So Jacob is absolutely nailing like a messianic prophetic word here, prophecy. He's telling Judah, this is what's going to happen to your line. And we're going to see this get picked up again in David. The promise is going to come to David out of Judah's line. And we're going to see a lot of this reiterated about an eternal king coming from David's line. But Jacob is obviously believing in faith for something that most of us don't realize Jacob even had the knowledge. Now, again, it's a partial knowledge. We don't really get the fullness of what the incarnation is of Christ until he comes at Bethlehem as a baby. Like, we don't get that full picture, but there was this hope. There was the hope even of Abraham that Isaac would be resurrected and this people would come from him. We see this hope that there's going to be this person that comes, a king that's going to rule over all the nations from the line of Jacob, from the line of Judah, and come. And so again, there was probably more being understood here than we even realize most of the time. I loved picking up these early prophecies, right? The earliest prophecy to Eve that her offspring was going to crush the head of the serpent. Now, they may have just taken that in a universal sense, that, her offspring would be in this constant war with evil, but it could also be taken as the seed being the Christ, the one who was going to come, Jesus, and crush the head of the serpent. So what happens to Judah in the future? Many messianic texts are going to draw imagery from this prophecy. Isaiah 63:1-6 is going to point back to this prophecy by Jacob. Revelation 19:11-15 does as well. So there's a number of texts that come back to this earlier Torah piece in Genesis and look at it and use it. So the later prophets had obviously read this, and they'll incorporate some of the imagery here to talk about Jesus. David would be of the line of Judah and start the kingly line of Israel. So all of this promise to Judah ends up happening, even though we have that start with God first choosing Saul from the tribe of Benjamin. At that point, we should know that was not going to be the long-term line, because we all know the king's going to come from Judah. And so again, even though we have that short-term king of Saul, we know that's not going to be the long-term kingly line in the nation. So that will be David. Solomon would be the one to come from that. And in Solomon, there would be absolutely this great time of plenty where there's so much abundance. And we also know ultimately that Jesus is going to come and bring the golden age and rule over all nations, right? We even see that today. There's every nation represented in the churches that Jesus rules over already, and that's only going to continue to be increased to more and more rulership of Jesus over everyone and everything. And he has the final judgment and all of that. And so again, we see a little bit of this too, the abundance of wine in Jesus' time. People accused him of being a drunkard. He obviously didn't get drunk, but he did go to a lot of parties and places. And Jesus starts his ministry by taking water and turning it into wine. He makes an abundance of wine, right? He has these huge jugs of what would have just been water and turns it into wine. And so again, we see in the time of Jesus, this signifying the fulfillment of this particular prophetic imagery that Jacob is laying down here, that wine is going to be an abundant sign of the kingship, that so much so that they could wash clothes in it. And that's kind of what happens at that wedding in Canaan. There's so much wine at that time that they probably could have washed clothes in it, right? Like, because Jesus made it from water. So again, we see that in the first four sons. Now the next few sons we're going to go through probably a little more quickly. I think Judah really stands out just because of, Jesus, Messiah coming from his line. So the fifth son, or maybe sixth son, these might be out of order. Jacob didn't quite keep them all in order. So just saying, Zebulun will reside at the seashore. This is what Jacob is saying over him. And he shall be a harbor for ships, and his flank shall be toward Sidon. Okay, so again, list not exactly in birth order. Zebulun The land allotted to Zebulun is not coastal like Asher, but was close enough to be rich from sea trade. So Zebulun's going to reside near the seashore. He's going to have a harbor for ships, and his flank shall be toward Sidon. So this kind of happens with Zebulun. He's not exactly right on the seafront, but he does have some seafronts. And it says in Deuteronomy 33:19 that it sucked the abundance of the sea in this area. And so again, at the start of Dan, Zebulun, and Asher, they paid for territory dominated by Sidon, but by providing forced labor. They traded liberty for fine things. And we're going to see that as a downfall for those three tribes. So that Zebulun here, but also Dan and Asher, as you're going to read about them, what they had to trade to Sidon was not good. They kind of enslaved some of their people so that they could have this great waterfront land. They didn't necessarily fight battles. They sold off people. And so again, this is a good and a kind of a bad thing that's going to happen in their future. So there's no real reason necessarily that Jacob would be saying this. He's basically just saying Zebulun's going to have a piece in the land. He's kind of giving a little bit aware, but he's not really calling Zebulun out for anything else. He's really given that blessing primarily to Judah, right? Skips over the first three sons because they've been trouble. And then now Judah's leading, and then Zebulun's getting something, but it's not everything. And then Issachar is a strong donkey lying down between the sheepfolds. Okay, a little bit of an odd image, right? A donkey laying down between some sheep. And when he saw that a resting place was good and the land was pleasant, he bowed his shoulder to carry burdens and became a slave at forced labor. So being a donkey here is not a good thing. It says that Issachar was willing to trade to become a beast of burden for the people of Sidon, right? It's basically what he's saying, and the people in that area, and become burdens and slave and forced labor. So instead of driving the people out or doing anything like that, they come into agreements where they become basically the servants and the slaves for the people there. So Zebulun, Dan, and Asher are going to have this trait. They are trading their liberty for fine things and pleasant land. And that's the way they decided to do things, not fight battles necessarily, right? Well, this is the tribes that were saying, oh, there's giants in the land, we don't want to fight, right? They weren't the ones that were like ready to go fight. And so again, they're going to have an allotment, but Issachar, especially being called a donkey that's laying down between some sheep, like this is not a real positive picture. It's kind of showing that he finds a resting place, he's happy with it, and he's willing to become a donkey and carry problems and other people's stuff. Okay, so again, we see that these blessings are kind of blessings sometimes and sometimes not. And maybe Jacob's just kind of reading into his son's attitudes here. He knows that these two or three sons, all they want is finery. They're not really in it, and that they don't want to have to lead or do anything tough. Maybe he's seen that in these sons, that they want the fine things, and they're just willing to kind of sacrifice themselves and carry stuff and get it the other way than having to do different kinds of leadership and fight the battles for it and those kinds of things. So the next four sons are going to be the concubine sons, and so he's going to kind of just go over them. So we just covered Leah's sons, and then the concubines had four sons, two each. And so they get a piece as well of the land. So verse 16, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a horned viper in the path that bites the horse's heels, so that the riders fall backwards. For your salvation I wait, Lord. So again, Dan, the first thing is said is Dan's going to be a judge. But history shows that he does not live up to this. This tribe will have to wait for the tribe of Judah to bring salvation. So Dan doesn't really do what he's called to do here. The tribe is known for violence and treachery in Judges 18. In its final listing, Dan is not mentioned in Revelation 7, 5, and 8. So Dan kind of just gets dropped out of the history here in the book of Revelation. Like I said, there's always 13 tribes, and so one always gets omitted. Dan, by the time we hit Revelation, is omitted. So again, Dan's going to be like a serpent, a horned viper that bites the horse's heel. And again, he's saying that Dan has every potential to do this. But again, he's going to end up just waiting for Judah to come and rescue him and the people group. So again, he could have been one of the judges, but it doesn't really work out that way. So that's a little bit of the difficulty, right? I said with some of these blessings, they're kind of prophetic, but they kind of aren't very straightforward. And I went through a number of commentaries just looking for more details, and it wasn't terribly satisfying at times with a couple of these tribes they don't really seem to live up to what you would expect from Dan being a judge of the people, or those types of things. So again, sometimes that's what happens, right? He's called to do something, but he doesn't really show up and live out that. And then verse 19, it says, "As for Gad, a band of raiders shall attack him, but he will attack at their heels." So Gad, it says the band of raiders are going to attack him, and he's going to attack them. So basically, Gad and these raiders are going to be in this conflict. And this is what happens. The border raids became the norm in the promised land for Gad. Gad ends up on part of the borderland that is constantly being raided. He attacks their heels, but he never overcomes them. So that people group of Gad, they have tribal area, and they just are constantly in these skirmishes with people raiding them and them having to fight back and never really overcoming that. And so that's absolutely spot on what happens. Again, I would like to dig into Dan a little bit more, just being the judge of the people, and if we say that at all. Again, but the tribe is typically, even in the time of the judges, known for its violence and treachery. Probably this idea of a horned viper in the path more than anything, biting the heels of horses, and then just kind of ending up waiting for the Lord's salvation, which, like I said, comes through Judah. And so again, some of these tribes aren't doing great here. So again, these are the 4 sons of the concubines. And so again, we're in the third one, which is Asher. As for Asher, his food shall be rich, and he will yield royal delicacies. This is all that's going to be said of him. He's going to have good food. Again, Asher would inherit fertile land by the sea. We already saw that. They would produce an annual quota for the palace. So this is absolutely what happens. We see this in 1 Kings 4:7, that Asher does have rich food and royal delicacies. He becomes the provision of food right off the sea to the palace. And so this is spot on for what Asher's role is in the land when they get there. Naphtali is the 4th of the concubine sons. Naphtali is a doe let loose. He utters beautiful words. So a doe is a deer, right? And he speaks beautiful words. We don't read much about Naphtali here exactly, but they would have victory under Barak in Judges 4 and 5. So that's positive. There's nothing really bad said here, right? He's a doe that's let loose, so meaning he has some freedom. And they will be a free mountain people. So this idea of being a loose doe kind of makes sense, right? Does live up on mountains and mountainous areas and have freedom. And so again, that's what his share of the land's going to be like. It's going to be a more peaceful than like Gad in the border raids, those kinds of things. And so again, we are seeing most of these being partly due to the land and where they end up. And he's kind of like, there's a couple of the tribes that get scattered. There's some of the tribes that get particular seafront land, some of them that get mountainous land, some of them get borderland. And he's kind of saying all this before they even know how the land's going to get divided up. Okay, so now we're going to get in the last 2 sons. And these are Rachel's 2 youngest sons, the favored sons. So these are going to be a little longer. Joseph, obviously, is the favored oldest son of Rachel. And so he's already been blessed with a double portion by Jacob taking Manasseh and Ephraim as his own sons. So again, there's no tribe of Joseph, but he does get a blessing. Joseph is a fruitful branch branch by a spring. Its branches hung over a wall. The archers provoked him and shot at him and were hostile towards him, but his bow remained firm and his arms were agile. From the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, from there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. From the God of your fathers who helped you, and by the Almighty who blesses you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lie beneath, blessings of the breasts and of the womb. The blessings of your father have surpassed the blessings of my ancestors up to the furthest boundary of the everlasting hill. May they be on the head of Joseph and on the top of the head of the one distinguished among his brothers. So Jacob is blessing him with the sea, with the land, with fruit of the wombs, with everything he can possibly think of, right? We kind of see the same blessing as what Isaac gave to Jacob, and Jacob is now passing it on to Joseph. The thing we don't see is that same rulership over the brothers that we see in Judah. We don't see that actually being given to Joseph. And so there is a little bit more split. Jacob was actually given both of that over Esau, but Joseph is given more of the blessing, where Judah is given more of the rulership or the family chief kind of idea, right? He's the head of the family at this point. And so again, Jacob is also calling out the history of Joseph, that he's been a fruitful branch. by a spring, a branch that hangs over a wall. The archers provoked him and shot at him and were hostile towards him. So he's acknowledging all the hardships of Joseph's life that he didn't deserve. It to be slaved, imprisoned, all these things. But his bow remained firm and his arms were agile. And from the hand of the mighty one of Jacob, from there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. And so he is calling out like another type of a godly anointing on him, and saying, God has been with you. God is the one that's been steadying you. Joseph is blessed, right? And so this is going to be this large blessing on his life. And it goes through that whole set of blessings. And I just want to read it a couple times because he's acknowledging Joseph's history and how faithful and, to be agile and able to still take a straight shot after you've been shot at is not normal, right? He's saying God has really intervened in him and been able to keep his heart right and help him along. The word blessing is used repeatedly for Joseph over and over and over. Joseph is already massively successful in Egypt. So what this blessing meant, was it mostly just historically looking at what was going on, or was it future looking? This blessing has already been fulfilled in the sense that Joseph basically second in control of all of the land of Egypt. He's made Egypt incredibly fruitful, and Pharaoh has more wealth and riches than he ever could dream of. So again, we see that this is not a hard blessing to have come up with. This isn't something that would have been hard. He could have just been looking at the natural circumstances at this point. And yes, he is distinguished among his brothers, absolutely, at this point. Now, moving forward, we mostly just see Manasseh and Ephraim as the tribes named. And again, they aren't the lines that end up leading, but they are part of the tribal group. So then the last one is the 12th son, Benjamin, the youngest, who is by far one of the youngest than all the others. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning, he devours the prey, and in the evening, he divides the spoils. Okay, so this is a little odd because Benjamin should have been another favored son. And this doesn't sound like a great thing to call your son a wolf, a ravenous wolf, dividing spoils. But we see that Benjamin actually ends up being a very violent tribe. In Judges 5:14 and 5:19 and 20, Psalm 68:27, it describes Benjamin as having this violent side. And so again, even where we would think this, now maybe there's some hints in Benjamin that this is already his personality and what's going on in his own life. Again, we don't know. But again, it is calling out what's going to happen. And a lot of times in Moses' time, the whole point of having this written down is that it's showing where the tribe started, what kind of personalities their forefather had, and how that's kind of carried on in the blessing in that type of tribe, and how they've kind of carried on that characteristic, right? Some of the tribes are willing to sell themselves and just be servants and take the best land that way and kind of hire themselves out to be able to live near the ocean or the sea, where Benjamin is going to be, a violent one, and not violent in a productive way, right? This isn't for justice or for conquering necessarily. We're not quite sure all the time. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But again, that's what we're going to see here with some of these different tribes. And so again, in verse 28, we just pick up with the general blessing. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them. He blessed them, every one, with the blessing appropriate to him. So the promised land was supposed to be like the Garden of Eden. It was supposed to be very prosperous, and he was blessing them to go back there at some point, to take over the land and be very prosperous in the hills, near the waters, in different areas of the land. He wanted to see them spread out over the whole place and really have their peace in their territory. And maybe some of these too were like, okay, this tribe has more strength or even the violence to be able to take what they need to. Other ones are, going to do it by trade and by selling themselves. But again, he's kind of calling this out, how this is going to come about. Then he commanded them, say, I'm about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpel, which is in the opposite of Mamre in Canaan, which Abraham bought along with the field of Ephron the Hittite as a burial site. And so again, he says, go bury me where Abraham and Sarah are buried. It's where Isaac and Rebekah, his wife, are as well, and Leah. And so again, this is a really important spot. I'm not going to read all of it, but it says, when Jacob finished commanding his sons, he drew his feet into the bed and breathed his last and was gathered to his people. So Jacob absolutely nails this last moment blessing. No more words after this. He basically climbs back into bed and passes on. So you can imagine this is a very somber moment. When it's somebody's final words, you really take them to heart. So some of these sons, there's no way of arguing dad out of this, or their fatherly, this is final. This is it. These are the last words. Some of them, it's harsh words to take. It's a lot of probably rejection and family dynamics that have been going on a long time. Jacob's made it very clear he wants to be buried in the promised land. He is telling them how important this is to the family. Don't think that all the wealth they have in Egypt is where they're supposed to be. Again, we also see here that Leah had died before they moved to Egypt and was already buried at the family tomb. I think this is new information at this point. And so again, it just is highlighting to most of them that he's calling out, your mother's buried there. You need to go bury me there. Like, let's remember how important this is. And, 6 of these sons were hers. And so they would have understood that, how important it was to bury him there. And so we're going to come to a close. The last chapter is just kind of a short one. I just thought it was fascinating to go through the different tribes, what Jacob said and then what happened, who they were, but then also how he was kind of prophesying into the future of that tribe, where they were going to end up in the land that they didn't even know yet. Like, it wasn't like they were sitting around saying, I get this piece of land when we get there. Like, that doesn't get really solved until much later. And so again, as we see this happening, Jacob is blessing them. Some of them are not as much a blessing as others, like I said, but he's really calling out who they are and what's going to happen here. And I don't know, sometimes this is a difficult passage, right? And we also see his hopes for who Joseph was, what Joseph already had. But we do see that at the end of this, Judah is kind of the surprise here, I'd say, because we've kind of seen this story of Joseph and Judah go back and forth. I also really appreciate that Jacob takes a minute to really say, look, Joseph's had it rough here. He's been shot at, like, by archers. Like, that's got to mean something to him. That his suffering was seen for what he went through, even if it did end up saving the family. That was very real. It was a real part. It's not just that those years got erased just because he became the king. We'll see that with David as well. He had some really rough years being shot at by Saul, chased by Saul, whatever it was. And then at the end of that, him still becoming king. But, those scars and those battle scars are still kind of there. You still have to deal with those things. And so we do see that in the life of Joseph, and then all the family dynamics here. It's going to carry on with them. They're going to be 12 tribes, but they're not always going to be united on everything, and they don't all have the same purpose and exact callings. They're going to each have regions and things that they do within the land that's slightly different. Again, I'm not going over all the details of the 12 tribes. We'll probably get into more of that as we go into the next study. But if you want to continue on with the second part of the Torah. But again, that's really where we are. And then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. Joseph commanded his servants and the physicians to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. Now 40 days were required for it, for such is the period required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for him for 70 days. So this is a long funeral. Joseph is making sure that everyone knows that this is an important man. He's getting him embalmed. He's going to have this massive funeral. They're going to have a procession with it. We'll find out. This is not just the standard length of time for embalming, but full 70 days of mourning that goes with it. Joseph is showing how much preeminence Jacob has in their lives as the father and the founding of the nation, basically. And so in this is a very honoring thing for Joseph to do, as being such a high up-ranking official. And then remember, because the Hebrews were despised by the Egyptians. So this is very non-cultural. This is Joseph really bridging the two cultures here. When the days for mourning were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, if now I have found favor in your sight, which at that point we know Joseph's found favor in the sight of Pharaoh, let me, I swore to my father that I would go up to the land in Canaan and bury him in the gravesite there. So I'm just going to paraphrase a lot of this because it's long. And he says, and Pharaoh says, go up to bury your father as you swore to him. So Joseph went up to bury his father. With him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt. Okay, so let's just stop here. Not only is Joseph going up with his brothers, right, the elders of his household, but also all his father's household, all of Joseph and his brothers, and all the elders of the land of Egypt. So this is a bunch of Egyptians now that are going to go on this funeral procession for Jacob, which I think is still quite unheard of. Like, they're really treating him as a great patriarch. And I think that's quite amazing. They left their little ones and their flocks and their herds in the land of Goshen. So they're not running away. This isn't like when Moses is trying to get the people to leave Egypt. This is totally different. They leave all their households set up. They leave the ones that can't travel, right? The little ones, the households, all that. But they take all of the father's household, all the brothers, everybody that they can on this huge journey. Chariots with teams of horses also went up with him, and it was a very great company. So this has probably got to scare all the lands that they're going to go pass through. This is a funeral procession. The family is going to travel to the promised land on this funeral procession. They've been out of the land for 17 years, and they're going back to the family plot to do this. Pharaoh, it has to be asked to grant permission. Joseph, as much as we want to think of him as in command, he actually, in a certain sense, is still completely under Pharaoh's rulership. Pharaoh can have him put in prison, kill him anytime he wants. So there is a certain part of Joseph's life that still has like this sense of lack of freedom in it. He's not really allowed to leave. And of course, I'm sure that Pharaoh doesn't want Joseph to look like he's leaving permanently. There's a good reason to send an entourage with him to make sure he comes back, but also to just passage of safety and things. And so this was a very noticeable funeral procession. When they came to the threshing floor beyond the Jordan, they mourned there with a great and sorrowful lament, and they observed 7 days of mourning. So this isn't just a short journey. They're going to spend a week of grieving. The Canaanites saw the mourning at the threshing floor. This is a grievous mourning for the Egyptians. Therefore, it was named Abel Mizraim, which is beyond the Jordan. So they basically renamed the place because of this great funeral that happens there, which is pretty impressive, right? So the Canaanites noticed that this is an Egyptian funeral. And so his sons did for him as he had commanded them. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave. And again, a bunch of names here about exactly where they were. It's Abraham's burial site. And after they had buried Jacob, Joseph returned to Egypt, he and his brothers, and all that had gone up with him to bury his father. So nobody stayed. It wasn't like one of the families stuck behind or any of that in the promised land. They all went back to Egypt. And we know this from the prophecy to Abraham that this was going to happen, that the family was going to be in a land for a long period of time. And that's already been covered. They all traveled to the promised land, knowing it's not in time to inherit yet. Famine's over, but they can't return. It will be well over 400 years. I believe it was 430 years to the day from when they left to when they get to return, and before they're delivered from Egypt. And so, again, this is going to be a huge period of time here where they're going to be in Egypt, and in that time, they're going to lose their freedom and become slaves. So, spoiler alert, we've all read it, but, that's kind of where we're going. So, in verse 15, when Joseph's brothers had seen that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong which we did to him?" So Joseph's brothers are back to being afraid. It's been 17 years of him doing good to them. And they still are like, Dad died, our father died. Maybe Joseph's going to come in revenge and come after us and have this revenge spirit. And so they sent instructions to Joseph saying, "Your father commanded us before he died, saying, 'This is what you'll say to Joseph: Please forgive, I beg you, the offense of your brothers and their sins, for they did you wrong.'" Now, again, we don't know that that's actually what Jacob said for them to do. This could just be another set of the brothers trying to appeal to their dead father for safety or something. "And now please forgive the offense of the servants of the God of your fathers." And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. So again, now we're seeing Joseph weep yet again over his brothers. And at this point, it's because they just don't get it. They don't understand his heart. Then his brothers also came and fell down before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants." But Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid, for am I in God's place?" So Joseph said, "This isn't my job. My job is not revenge. It's not to kill you. I don't know what's happened, but obviously trust hadn't been rebuilt in these 17 years, and things hadn't been smoothed over. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." And I think this is the line that stands out over and over and over in this book. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. We see this in the lives of so many people in Genesis, right? There's this storyline of God that's happening, that God has good planned. He has this perfect garden, all of this stuff, and the people just keep messing it up. They cause trouble for each other. But in the midst of that, and we see this in Joseph's life, I was just thinking through this earlier, that Joseph is in prison, and he could see this as two ways. He can either see the harm that people have done to him, or he can see the hand of God's favor. And in many places, we actually see the favor of God coming into some of the roughest times in people's lives. It doesn't depart. So the favor of God is on Joseph as he's younger, and his brothers hate him for it. We see the favor of God, and Joseph is in prison. And even the lady, Potiphar's wife, who gets him imprisoned, hates him because of the favor on him, and he won't do what she wants. And then the favor is still on him when he's in prison. And so the favor never lifts, but the favor doesn't mean his life gets easier. And it doesn't mean that the people are going to like it. And so again, some of the people use it for their benefit. Potiphar used it for his benefit. The prison master used it for his benefit. And again, Pharaoh used it for his benefit. Pharaoh loved the favor on Joseph's life. It made him rich. He knew how to leverage it. But in many cases, the people do not react to the favor of God on someone the way we would expect them to. And so again, that's something to be very aware of, that just because, and I think this is part of the whole idea of being people pleasers. If Joseph was out to please his brothers or his father or anybody in this case, well, his father loved him, but it wouldn't have mattered. He still would have been in prison. These things would have happened. He really was having to keep himself right with God. And the favor was just following him no matter what the people were doing. So we see the storyline of God to just pour favor down on Joseph, but we see that the people around him some of them were reacting well, and some of them were reacting poorly to that favor. And so this is kind of this normal stewardship. And Joseph is very well aware of this. He's had plenty of time to think about this. What was meant for evil, all these people, God meant it for good. God can make things work out. It's not that God intended this necessarily. It's not that all these details, but whatever the humans throw at God's plan, it's just not going to work out. God's major overarching plan of favor and to spare this whole family line and the earth from this famine was going to happen. It was to bring about the present results, to keep many people alive. Joseph saw his purpose in life as God's hand on him. Those years in prison end up being used to keep so many people alive. Joseph gets his redemptive purpose in life. So therefore, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones. So he comforted them and spoke to them kindly. So again, Joseph is making sure they don't go into enslavement in that time period. This is not when their enslavement begins. Joseph doesn't hand them over to Pharaoh as slaves. He's really forgiven them. And again, like I said, we're really having to deal with the idea of favor, of following somebody and what that looks like. Favor following someone might mean they're in prison for a time. Favor following someone, right? And it's not necessarily what we humanly weigh out as favor, but we do see that that is what it looks like, right? And sometimes favor is getting elevated second in the land, and sometimes it's not. So again, we see great protection and blessing and God being with Joseph. And we'll see that line as well very regularly, I'll be with you. That's what Jacob was very concerned about. Will God go with me? Will you go with me to Laban's house? Will you go with me to Egypt? Or are you only going to be the God in the promised land? And God says, I'm going to be with you. So now Joseph stayed in Egypt, he and his father's household, and Joseph lived 110 years. Joseph saw the third generation of Ephraim's son, and also the sons of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were born on Joseph's knees. Joseph said to his brothers, I'm about to die, but God will assuredly take care of you and bring you up from this land to the land which he promised on oath to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, God will assuredly take care of you, and you shall carry my bones up from here. So Joseph died at the age of 110, and they embalmed him and placed him in a coffin in Egypt. So we're immediately seeing ages even shorten. Abraham and Isaac were nearly 175, 180 in age. Jacob's like, I didn't live terribly long. He's like 137. Now Joseph is living to 110. And this seems like it's a decently long age. Again, Joseph is embalmed, and he's going to be carried off years later to the promised land. And so again, he's making sure that he's going to be buried there too. There's no big funeral procession to take his bones back. His bones were going to be stored. And Moses would take the bones of Joseph to the promised land, would carry them there, and then Joshua would be finally the one that gets to put them there. We see in Exodus 13:9, Joseph's bones are talked about, and Joshua 24:32, the final burial of Joseph and where he's buried. And so again, we see great faith as he dies, right? That's basically why all these men and women end up in the Hall of Faith, because they were looking at a promise that said further out from their lives. They understood that the storyline was going to continue and that there was going to be more to this world than what they saw even when they came to the end of their lives. So again, we've just seen that as we've gone through this, the goodness of God, and the faithfulness through this entire storyline from start to finish, that his creation was good, and he meant a very good redemptive plan, even in the minute that people, Adam and Eve, sinned. And that's been a continual theme, that this goodness was going to continue through the entire history, that God wanted to continue to forward something of his covenant to bring salvation and the possibility of salvation to all people. And that was going to come obviously through Jesus. And so we see this whole setup now. It's all set up. History's all set up, right? We got it in Genesis, and it's just going to continue from here with that storyline. It's been great going through this verse by verse and really digging into each section. And so, again, I just love where we're going to end here with this final look at just the promised land. It is what Joseph's eyes were looking at, and he's really going to die in faith. He's giving them a final instructions of what to do with his bones, and they're going to have to live under this for the next 400 years. And we're going to find out immediately after this that as soon as Joseph dies, the next pharaohs are going to raise up and they're going to enslave the people. It's going to be very tough for them, but they keep this promise in front of them. They have his bones with them for these next hundreds of years. You're right, they're there 430 years total. And so there's like 400 more years where they have his bones that they're looking at going, we got to get those back to the promised land. Remember those promises, those 12 promises, they wrote them all down here from Jacob's blessing, right? He's the main patriarch of all 12 of the tribes. And so they have this in front of them. And again, they don't necessarily, by the end of that, all follow God. By the time they need to be freed from Egypt, they don't all know God in that way. They've lost some of their history, but they do know that they are a different people group and they need to be free and get back to the promised land. So I love that Joseph, his bones kind of become this representation of the promise at this point, that they have to get these back at some point to the promised land. So I think that's where we're going to leave off in this wonderful narrative at this point of the promises and the blessings of God. No matter what people do, God does have his way come through as the underlying foundational story of it all.